I often ask people how many three-letter federal agencies they can name, right? And a really well-informed American can maybe name a dozen. Okay, well, there's the CDC, the FDA, the FBI, the CIA. I could probably rattle off a few more if I stopped and thought about it. The Department of Defense, the Department of this, Department of that. And then I asked them, do you know how many federal agencies there are total that your taxpayer dollars are funding? And the answer is there are 434, most of which most Americans have never heard of, obviously. Right. Well, one of those agencies that most Americans have never heard of, fairly new, it was conceived in the waning days of the Obama administration in 2016. It was finally approved and funded by Congress in 2018. So it hasn't been around for very long. And CISA stands for the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, a brilliant government acronym that has the same word in it twice, just in case you wondered what they were about.
Super
and they're
efficient.
Supposedly, yes, exactly, supposedly set up to protect our digital infrastructure and our critical infrastructure from things like cyber attacks or other forms of sabotage, computer viruses and so forth. Protect the grid so that nefarious foreign actors don't try to take us down. Well, most Americans, I think, have some notion of what our digital infrastructure is and what our critical infrastructure is. In 2017, the first director of CISA, Jen Easterly, who's one of the defendants in our case, said, well, part of protecting our critical infrastructure is protecting our election infrastructure. And CISA stepped in to take control at the federal level of election integrity, which has traditionally and constitutionally been a state by state issue. The states are responsible for elections. And then she went a step further and said, and part of our election infrastructure is our cognitive infrastructure. So CISA needs to be protecting our cognitive infrastructure. Now, our listeners may be thinking, well, I think I kind of know what our digital infrastructure is. And I sort of probably know what our election infrastructure is, like make sure the voting machines aren't hacked or something like that. But what's our cognitive infrastructure? In the queen of all government euphemisms, our cognitive infrastructure is literally the thoughts inside of your head. Yeah. So CISA very quickly pivoted to censorship, and they became the central clearinghouse, the nerve center of the government censorship apparatus, through which these government cutouts, the quasi-private entities I mentioned earlier, and other federal agencies fund their censorship demands to the social media companies. And so here you have a new government agency that, under the guise of cybersecurity, has been literally not just protecting you online from computer viruses, but controlling the flow of information online. And to really wrap your head around everything that's happened in the 4 years when it comes to censorship, once you kind of peel back the carpet and see what's underneath, it's quite shocking to realize that basically everything all the information that I've found online over the last 4 years has to a large extent been curated by the government, not even by the private companies. And, we could debate about issues with the private companies censoring, but even just bracket that for a moment, been curated by the government. That's not a society that I want to live in. I mean, no. it's very, very serious. And so people might think, well, you guys are talking about totalitarianism. That sounds overblown. A totalitarian ethos, let's say, can, I think, coexist with democratic structures and institutions appearing to stay in place, right? Oh, well, we still have elections. Right. How could you call this a totalitarian system? Yeah, but if an agency like CISA has taken over not only election infrastructure, but our cognitive infrastructure, how is that influencing our own voting patterns, the access that we have to information about candidates in order to make a well-informed democratic decision about who's going to represent us? So again, I think we need to get away from the notion that totalitarianism means, men in brown shirts and concentration camps and so forth, and look at the core of what makes a system like that function in ways that are totally oppressive and invasive of these intimate aspects of our life. And once we get away from that sort of, I don't know, World War II based imagery and ask, how did this whole society like Soviet communism or Nazism actually function and control people? Then you realize, well, a lot of the kinds of things that made that possible are happening now. And in fact, they're happening at a scale that Hitler or Stalin could only have dreamed of. The level of surveillance that we have now is, what those guys had was totally primitive compared to the reach of the technologies that
absolutely
our intelligence agencies, national security agency has at their disposal. And Congress just this week approved warrantless backdoor searches of Americans' data online in a bipartisan vote. Our new Speaker of the House flipped on that issue at the last minute and was the tie-breaking vote to push this FISA, Foreign Intelligence Service Act bill through Congress without the necessary amendments to protect us from attacks on the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, which has to do with, needing a warrant to probable cause, the endorsement of a judge to invade your privacy and search your private information. So the First Amendment is under attack. Now the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution is under attack. Our constitutionally protected privacy rights have also been compromised by an act of Congress. And that happened just a few days ago, literally.
I know. No, I know that. And I think that people, like you said, it's just it's what they did before, and they've just modernized it. I mean, people know.
Same playbook.
Same. Exactly. They buy
technologically advanced. Yeah. New media, new technologies, same playbook.
Exactly.
And same justification, right?
Exactly.
Oh, it's health and safety. Right?
Yep.
The Nazis never overturned the pre-Nazi Weimar Republic Constitution.
Right.
What they did was govern under a declared state of emergency under Article 48 of the Weimar Constitution, which allowed for the suspension of certain constitutional rights during a public emergency. So public health, public safety, state of emergency is always the mechanism by which these things are put in place. And in the case of Germany, that state of emergency lasted 12 years, virtually the entirety of the time that the Nazis were in power.
Well, and just to be clear, that's in the United States. That's not how it works. There are still rules in place. The Constitution and your constitutional rights are still exist even in the state of emergency, even though the government has tried to brainwash you and gaslight you into believing that they don't. And that's people who have been following me and my work. I just had a live with Peggy Hall. We have a seminal case here in Orange County, because in Orange County during the local emergencies, because in the United States you have hyper local, like city declared emergencies, then you have county emergencies, and then you have statewide emergencies. And then if you can exert your control in the area that you have most direct impact, which is locally, then you can control the declarations of emergencies, end them or maintain them in your cities, and then your counties, and then your state. And if you can end enough emergencies, then you can end the statewide emergency. And if enough states end their emergencies, then you can end the federal or national emergencies. And so people, Hitler suspended constitutional rights. Here, they tried to brainwash you into believing that they had suspended your rights, or that they didn't exist. But that is not true. So people,